1. For some context, this story took place back in 2020, 2 weeks before COVID hit, and we all got locked down. Our classes are about 5 hours long, and it's one class per week, instead of the class broken up throughout the week. So for most of our class, we usually do work. Then for the last hour or two, we get to quietly go talk to our professor about our projects. There are 25 students per class, so it takes a while for the professor to get through everybody in that short amount of time. So my fellow classmates, I, a 20-year-old woman, were working, and it came time to chat with our professor. Matt, a 20-year-old man, always went to talk to the professor first for the first few weeks of the semester, and none of us had a problem with it. But Matt started to take up more of the professor's time, one day taking up 30 minutes of the allotted hour we were given. Obviously, that was not okay, so the professor decided to make a sign-up sheet so other students were able to get a chance to talk to him in a more reasonable amount of time. So the following week, we all signed up on the whiteboard, and Matt's name ended up being 5th on the list. When the time came to chit-chat with the professor, Matt completely ignored the list on the whiteboard and decided to be the first to speak to the professor, being absolutely inconsiderate to the entire class. Everybody was peed, but we were all too nice to say anything to him. So later that night when I got home, I decided to message him because at the time we were friends, and I wanted to share my feelings about his behavior and come up with a friendly solution for the following week. This is where it turns to crap. I'm going to summarize this as much as possible. I started off the conversation by asking Matt if somebody different in the class could be the first one to go talk to the professor and give everybody else a chance to get help with their project. Matt then told me that he wasn't going to relent. This word was repeated a lot. But if the other classmates got their name on the board first next week, then by all means. Then apologized for being a greedy bee. I was baffled because that was unexpected and totally uncalled for. I told him to be considerate of the other classmates, and he continued to talk about the other students like they were below him. In the middle, we had a few back and forths, mostly him not giving in and how he deserves to talk to the professor, and that he worked hard to be in that class. And what are the rest of the students, chopped liver? I told him if he wasn't going to be respectful, then we had nothing further to talk about. Matt then told me he was going to bring his own whiteboard marker the following week, and if anybody else cared, they needed to get to the class before him. I took that as a challenge. The following week rolls around, and I was at the school early to work on classwork. I eventually made my way to the classroom, 45 minutes early. Guess what I had in my pocket? My own whiteboard marker. Guess what I was going to do with that whiteboard marker? Write every single student's name on that whiteboard. I was friends with most of the people in our class, and I got permission from almost everybody to write their name down. There were probably 15 names on that whiteboard by the time I was done. One of my friends was already in the class working, and she was able to tell me what happened when I left the classroom to get my things. So apparently, Matt came into the classroom, saw the whiteboard, and his jaw dropped. He then proceeded to ask my friend when I came into the room and wrote all the names, and she told him a shorter time, like I had just left the room. He then stared at the board for a bit, then left the room. I come back to class and got ready, got the story from my friend, and got back to my seat. Matt was usually 15 minutes early, but he didn't walk into class till 5 minutes after class started, and he was visibly upset. I didn't say anything to him. We proceeded with the class, and everybody had a chance to talk to the professor, and our day ended. Redemption for everybody. Then COVID hit the next week, and I didn't see him for the rest of the year. While we did classes online, he did make a forced apology. Then I told him I needed to think about it, and I still needed my space. He didn't give me my space. I blocked him. He called me a two-faced bee behind my back, and I avoided him like the plague the last 2 years of university. Not a very satisfying ending, but it was such a stupid quarrel, and I laughed with my friends at how dumb the whole thing was. 2. When I, Boomer Aldazaf, was in college for the first couple of years, I was good friends with a student my age, Jade. Then I went to work one summer for her family's business. It was in an isolated location like a campground, and I didn't have a car, so I was pretty much stuck there. We were getting paid into a personal account that would get turned over to us at the end of the summer. We didn't need money because meals were cafeteria style, free for staff, and incidentals were charged against our wages. Everything was great for the first month. The work was hard, but I loved getting really fit and tanned. Then Jade's dad, the big boss, started paying a lot of attention to me, starting off in public, but then he started cornering me and making comments about my figure. This was way before anyone even talked about sexual harassment, and women were supposed to take it as a compliment and flirt back, or at least say thanks for the compliment. So this geezer who would not leave me alone and would often assign me to help him with stuff like driving to town for supplies, so I'd be stuck in the car for a couple of hours with him, telling me he'd never been unfaithful to his wife before, but he would do it with me. I can't even remember saying anything back, just staring out the window hoping he wouldn't get mad. He even tried to come into my bunk one night, and I jumped up and ran out and spent the night in a bathroom stall. I could hear him looking for me. The next day, we acted like nothing happened. It was so weird, feeling grossed out and stuck, and looking back, I don't know why I didn't feel scared. I think dating back then, I just felt scared all the time, and this was no different except I was so isolated. Jade had to know what was going on, but she was busy hooking up with one of the guys our age, so I hardly saw her. And the one time, when she saw him trying to corner me, she laughed and said, "He doesn't mean anything by it." So I knew she was no help. I ended up leaving early and forfeiting half my pay, the penalty for not finishing the full season. After paying for my trip home, I made a whopping $100, which was a lot more way back then, when a pack of cigarettes was 25 cents, and rent on my first one-bedroom apartment was $90 a month. The worst was that Jade and I were already signed up to be roommates in the dorm for the next year. The only time the subject of summer came up, when I tried to talk to her about what happened, I didn't even get a sentence out when she started crying and said dramatically, "How do you think that made me feel? He's my father." And she ran in the bathroom and slammed the door. After that, we just acted like the summer never happened, and we were roommates for that year, but we were never close again. Fast forward 40 years, a couple of weeks ago I got a voicemail message. I would not have recognized her voice. Jade was talking like we were still BFFs. Said that it had been too long and she just wanted to catch up. Said she lives on the opposite side of the country, has some chronic illness. I can't even remember what else. Would love to catch up, would love for me to visit, blah blah blah. Listening to her blather on, I kept checking in with myself. How do I feel? Am I upset? How should I feel? Do I feel sorry for her? Finally, her message ended with a cheery, "I really look forward to hearing from you." And my petty revenge. I erased her voicemail and hung up the phone. And I'm smiling just writing this. The best revenge is a life well lived. I got a bit worked up writing this out, and I feel for the young me who was so ill-equipped to deal with sexism and sexual assault and the unfairness of life in general. But I got through it. Good for me. 3. This happened almost 10 years ago. I was probably 19 years old. I was home alone when my neighbor rang my doorbell to tell me someone had hit my parked car. My neighbor and I went out to inspect my car, and there were some light scratches and the paint was messed up. My concerned neighbor told me that the other driver should pay to fix it, and if there was any trouble I should call the police, and she would be a witness. She told me she heard a loud noise outside, came out and saw a man in a blue SUV pull away, and moved the car further down the street in front of another house. I thanked her, and went back inside to see if anything was caught on the security cameras we have. The camera points at our driveway and into the street. Mom parks in the driveway, so I always parallel park my car right in front of our house. Sure enough, when I replay the last 30 minutes, a blue SUV pulls up behind my car, tries to parallel park, and hits my car in the process. He definitely realized he hit something because he comes out of the car, looks, gets back in, and then drives past my car down the street out of frame. This was a big, tall man wearing a bright orange polo, very easily identifiable. I honestly didn't mind the scratches, to me it was minor. If he had came to tell me about the accident instead of my neighbor, I probably would have been okay if he just apologized. My neighborhood is very small, and I know most of my neighbors. I had not recognized this man. I walked outside to where I saw the blue SUV, now parked in front of the house with a recently sold sign. Surely it wasn't... I walked up and rang the doorbell. He answered in an annoyingly bright orange polo and whitey tighties. Ew. Now in hindsight, everything makes sense, but I was young, scared, and trying to hype myself up for the confrontation already. And this was just creepy and weird to me. Why would you think it's okay to answer the door like that? I asked if he was the owner of the blue SUV outside.
Which one?
That one, the only blue SUV outside. I explained to him about what my neighbor told me and security camera footage. He says, hold on, puts on his pants, and tells me to show him the footage, so we walk towards my house. Again, I was very scared and nervous. Even if he was a new neighbor, I wasn't sure about inviting him into the house and what his reaction would be, so I decided to record on my phone our interaction from him first entering my home. I replay the footage on our security monitor of his car hitting mine, him getting out with the same shirt. At the end, where he's driving away, we also see and notice a Star Wars sticker on the back of the SUV that matches what I saw in his actual car too. Anyway, it doesn't matter. He gets angry and says, "That's not me." This was honestly not the response I was expecting at all. I laughed, nervously. Like, what do you mean? I say your shirt is the same.
That could be anyone.
It's your car, your sticker.
You can't really see.
But your shirt color when you get out.
You can't prove that's me.
Okay. So he just grumbles away, heads out my door and back to his house. At this point, I'm pretty mad too. Again, if he was apologetic, even if he had given me a sob story excuse how he's having a rough time, made a bad decision, whatever, I would have just been like, don't worry about it, it's just scratches, it's an older car anyway. But you 1, hit and run, 2, deny and lie when confronted. With all this evidence, like no. So I listened to what my neighbor said earlier. Call the police if there's trouble. You want to be a weirdo? Now I'll be petty and make this bigger than it needs to be. Police are now here, talking to me and my neighbor who heard and saw him. I explained I confronted him, showed him the footage and his denial. I showed the police the security footage, as well as the confrontation recorded on my phone, where a big guy in an orange shirt is pointing to another man in an orange shirt yelling, "That's not me." The police also found this pretty amusing. I talked to the police, and while my concerned neighbor was being fussy like, "Doesn't she need to get that repainted?" The cop was like, "These damages are so minor, not really, but I could call insurance to figure out the damage, cause he'd pay if I wanted it repaired." I said no, cause it wasn't really significant. Last I saw was him talking with the police in front of his house. Later in the day, my concerned, nosy neighbor comes back to tell me he was arrested. She saw him, of course, getting put into handcuffs and put in the back of the police car. Later that week, I was visited by a detective from the police department. He wanted to go over my statements again, as well as emailing him the video footage I had. He explained to me that he was arrested for DUI. Like I said, everything made sense then. Why did he park in front of my house first, then move his car near his house? I have no idea. I just thought he was a weirdo, but answering the door in his underwear, his glazed eyes, illogical gibberish, arguing, repeating, "That's not me," definitely drunk. I hadn't been around people who really drank like that, so I didn't know. He smelled, but I just thought it was B.O. Definitely not a good first impression, since the whole neighborhood was now talking about our new neighbor's drama, courtesy of Nosy Neighbor. They moved out about a year later. 4. My wife and I are at a Japanese steakhouse with my wife's co-worker, her husband, who is an arrogant engineer, wife's co-worker number 2, and her husband, my CPA. And lastly, arrogant engineer 2 and his wife. Each couple has 2 teenage children with us. This is in America, where the chefs cook in front of you. Coworker 1 and arrogant engineer 1 invited all of us for their youngest daughter's birthday, since their daughter is close with our daughter. So the parents are at one table and the teens at another. At the teen table, my daughters, 17 and 14, order sushi appetizers, mocktails, and shrimp with scallops. At our table, the sake is flowing along, with a few top-shelf drinks. My wife and I order our appetizers, drinks, and dinners. We're all paying for ourselves, and I see Arrogant Engineer 1 and 2 seem to be in competition for who can spend the most. My CPA and I chuckle at them and stay out of the fray. Until Arrogant Engineer 2 hears my daughter order and says to her, "Be careful now, your daddy is only an agricultural engineer. He doesn't make as much as us real engineers." For context, they are structural engineers with bachelor's degrees. I am an agricultural engineer with a PhD. I work for governments, private investors, and several agro corporations. I own my own consulting firm. I help build sustainable, reusable gardens, and this work allows me to travel to poorer countries and help them use what they have to start growing their own food. Apparently, these men thought all I did was travel to impoverished places and teach people to dig in the dirt. They believed I did all this for free and therefore made very little money. I am not rich by any stretch, but I'm comfortable. We don't do extravagance, so we have savings and my wife works. However, in 2023, I was awarded a handsome contract to design tower gardens in several states. It's a 7-figure contract over 3 years. Back to dinner. These guys ask me about the most ridiculous things, like, is it good to grow onions and carrots in the same garden? And were laughing at me and my work until their wives told them to stop. I chalk it up to drunken arrogance and don't even bother to answer. My CPA was laughing so hard he almost fell out of his chair. Apparently, he is Arrogant Engineer 1 CPA as well, and knows the ins and outs of both of our finances. Arrogant Engineer 1 taunts CPA to tell the table what he brought home last year after bonuses. CPA pulled up the figures on the phone and tells us it's about 1/3 of what I brought home in 2023. The CPA says, "I have yours up, want me to share?" I decline, and he nods. Cue another round of taunts. I go to the restroom and find the waiter. I pay for the whole check and leave a generous tip on top of what they added for a big party. After our sorbet, the waiter thanks me in front of everyone for the tip and wishes everyone a good night. Arrogant Engineers 1 and 2 stare at me for a moment. I smile, nod, and tell CPA to tell them my income last year, after which I simply said good night. Petty? Absolutely. Gratifying? Damn right. 5. I'm a 39-year-old woman, and 8 years ago I was dumped by my ex. He's now 44. I'm usually on good terms with my exes, but that one was a piece of work. He body-shamed me. Apparently a woman weighing 64 kilograms is extremely fat and unappealing. He forced me to do things I hated, and he cheated for half a year, not wanting to break up until we go on 2 trips paid by me. He made a point of telling me in which ways his new girlfriend is better, smarter, read agreeable, and thinner. It was so bad I ended up in a mental ward. Oh, and he told me that no one would believe me anyway. And nobody cares how he treats women, so I'm free to bitch online about it. Okay then. I got better. I calmed down and started bitching. I wrote a "Don't hire that one" post. He has an extremely rare surname. Only ones I know are either his family or a world-famous athlete. It helped me a lot. I wrote how he can't keep a job for more than half a year because he thinks he's smarter than anyone and argues instead of doing what needs to be done. How his references are fake because these are his friends' contacts, not his employers. How he puts gazillions of courses in his CV to wear the reader out. His CV is like 30 pages long. Ain't nobody got time for that. So that they won't catch on to how little experience he actually has. How he's sure that sleeping with a business contact could be helpful for his business, and that women sometimes need to be beaten up to see light. It's all very true. I have screenshots of chats to prove it. Oh, did you mean that I can tell about our breakup, but not about your professional life? Well, why didn't you specify? I'm moderately popular at social media, so a month or so later, An HR contacted me to clarify. Apparently, he applied for a position. Well, I saw to it that he didn't get it. It happened twice more. But I supposed a lot more HRs checking social media just read my posts silently. One time, some bikers contacted me for his phone number. He apparently wrote about a girl, a well-known racer who died in a crash, trashing her as a dumb bitch who deserved it. I suppose that phone call didn't end very well. I check on him once every 2 years or so. No career, no family. Girlfriends are apparently way smarter than me and run away screaming after half a year tops. I suppose that someone did believe me after all. And I am happily married to a great guy, and am a bit famous professionally. Stupid fat ugly me. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to Revenge is Ice Cream, episode 337. And thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use their stories in this video. Before you go, please hit the like button. If you'd like early access to these videos, then you can support me on my Patreon page, which is linked in the description, as is the link to the Hellfreezer merchandise store on Teespring. If you especially enjoyed today's video, why not leave a tip? You can do that by clicking on the little heart with the $sign in the middle underneath the video. And you don't have to do that, but thank you if you choose to. Okay, as there's no other business today, let's move right along to today's question and answer of the day. And today's question: when you think of your time in high school, those of you who are not in high school anymore, what do you think of musically? And for me, the first one that pops into head for me is Ben Folds 5. Because I was introduced to Ben Folds and Ben Folds 5 through a friend named Chris in high school. I haven't spoken to Chris for many years. No reason, just, you leave high school, people drift apart. But I still like Ben Folds 5, as well as a number of other, artists and musicians I came across over the years. Pretty simple one today, so why don't you let me know what yours are in a comment below. And before we go, let's have the answer of the day from a previous video. And this is in relation to exotic foodstuffs you want to try but haven't gotten around to yet. And today's answer comes from Juan Legrand, 8651. It isn't a weird food, but is a lot of variety. Bread, German bread. They have so many different breads. You can never go wrong with bread. Always good to shove in your face. Reports of me threatening to beat people up with day old baguettes have not been founded. Anyone who says they are is probably telling the truth, but shh. Also, and for the sake of honesty, an honourable mention goes to, whereas others, William Afton IRL. William spotted that the fire crackle sound at the start of the videos was actually just me crumpling a bit of plastic. It was actually a potato chip bag. The rationale was it was a placeholder until I could find one that I could legally use for commercial purposes, like an actual proper stock one. Thinking a lot of Foley sounds aren't really what they sound like, because oftentimes fire is actually somebody just crumpling plastic, albeit layered and put together a lot better than I did it. Because initially the one we were using, which I did like, that came in Filmora, even though you're paying for Filmora in order to use it, you can't use it for commercial purposes, for, to fuck with people maybe. I don't know what the reasons are for that. Don't make them available if you can't use them for any reason. That's my thinking there. Don't do that. So that was a placeholder. We have swapped that sound out, so with the upcoming videos, this video, actually, will have a nice, warm, welcoming, crackly fire sound. And I don't know how it was made. It could have been someone recording a fire, or it could have been someone beating up a badger with a spoon. I don't know. So good job, William. That was very well spotted. Okay. And with that, I'm going to head off for now. So until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourselves.